But we're getting close, man. We're getting close to the end of Matthew, at least in ordinary time, and just such good stuff. We're in Matthew chapter 22 today, 15 through 22, and we have these words. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are sincere and teach the way of God in accordance with truth and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not? But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax. And they brought him a denarii. Then he said to them, Whose head is this, and whose title? And they answered, The emperor's. And he said to them, Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's. When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. Honestly, I don't think this is a bad question. It's a pertinent question for the religious and moral reality of the day. Is it lawful to pay taxes? In an occupied country, in a good way, fanatically concerned with righteousness or lawfulness to their deity, is it lawful to pay tribute to a tyrannical leader claiming to be the Son of God, as such as it is written on this coin? If Jesus says yes, then he will lose face with the crowd. He'll be a turncoat. I thought he wasn't afraid of anything, they would whisper. Is he just a hypocrite? If he says no, then he will be guilty of sedition with the government, with Herod, and he will be held accountable either way. The Pharisees and the Herodians, the religious scholars and powerful of the day, would have indeed trapped him. It is a good question, and it's a dangerous one. In response, Jesus asks to see a coin, and they bring him a denarii. And he asks whose likeness is on it, or whose image. Caesar, they say. For which we have the well-known response, then, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and give unto God what is God's. Whose likeness or image is on it? The word that Jesus uses is the same word used in Genesis when it is said, and God creates us in God's likeness or image. So let me ask again, you religious scholars who knew that, remembering that humans are God's image, whose image then is on the coin? If we were to look at a picture of you or one of your children or someone you love, and you saw them on the refrigerator on that plastic see-through magnetic frame, and you look at that picture and they say, and someone comes over who doesn't know you and says, Who is this? Who is this little boy? Or who is this young girl? Or who is this great-looking fella? And you would say, well, it's Malin, or it's Ann, or it's Tim, or whoever it is that you have on your refrigerator. But you would also be correct in saying, well, it's an image of God. Because that is who you are. And that is indeed who is stamped on that coin. It isn't just an image of Caesar. Because Caesar is human, created in the image of God, it is also an image of God. In one way, it certainly is his image. In a deeper way, it is God's image. Because Caesar, whether he ever acknowledges or not, or acts like it, is also God's image. He cannot run away from who he is any more than we can run away from the rising sun. On one level, since the coin bears the likeness of Caesar, it is possible to say that Jesus answers the question, is it lawful? Well, yeah, I guess. If it has his image on it, sounds like it's his. Give it back to him. But the deeper and more important truth is using the emperor's likeness and these religious scholars' familiarity with Scripture. In God's image, we were created. Jesus reminds them the truth that humans, including Caesar, bear the likeness of God, and as such, belong to God and God alone. So did he answer the question? No, he didn't. Whose likeness is really on the coin, that of Caesar's or that of God's? Or is it both? Both. And they go away amazed. I think the scholars were amazed, or I like to think the scholars were amazed because they understand exactly what Jesus has just said. I think they have been reminded that they bear the likeness of God, as does Caesar. And they are amazed and wowed, not because he evaded the trap, but because in springing it so deftly, he has reminded them of how profound a truth it is of who they are and to whom they belong. Earlier in this story, Jesus calls them hypocrites. You hypocrites. Do you know what hypocrite literally means? It means something akin to acting on a stage. Hypocrite means you've taken on a fake or a false image. You're putting on a show. You're not being your true self. You say you're one thing, but you're actually another. You might be wearing a mask. We are coming to a time of masks, aren't we? Halloween, the night where children and childish adults continue to dress up, wear masks, and become, for a short while, something else. But after those few hours of make-believe, we take off the mask, and our children are no longer zombies, ghouls, or princesses. Well, maybe they're always princesses and princes, but they go to bed. And we go back to work the next day because we know who we are. In the book, the great book, Where the Wild Things Are, a young boy in trouble for playing a monster is sent to his room, and there he allows his inner monster to explore a mysterious world where the wild things are. Until he too becomes wild. Anyone remember the book? Until he too becomes wild, but he also becomes lonely and sad and at least a little bit hungry. And he goes back to where he can be, in fact, a little boy, to a home in a room with loving parents. And he discovers we are to know and we are to discover his true self, where he truly belongs. These scholars are hypocrites because they have forgotten their true selves. First, because they come to him pretending sincerity, but more importantly, because in opposing Jesus, they are opposing the God they claim to serve. They are not being true to themselves. It is like they have put on a mask, but later when they look at themselves in the mirror, they have forgotten whose likeness they actually bear and to whom they truly belong. They have become counterfeits. To speaking of money, fakes. A counterfeit is an object that is pretending to be the real thing. Most often we think of counterfeit money, fake money, cleverly designed to be the real thing, and how cleverly we might design our actions to fake real surrender to the God whose likeness we bear. Now the scholars think Jesus is the counterfeit, that he is the fake Messiah, the fake teacher, that he is the fraud, fooling the masses into believing he is something that he is not. But his answer, sly answer, I think reveals to them that maybe it is not Jesus that is the counterfeit here, but they themselves. And like a revelation of an amazing thing, the mask they had been wearing as they became tools of the powers to be, they became tools of Rome and tools of Herod, has shocked them, amazed them, and wowed them. Oh, they might be thinking, is that what I am? I think I remember now. I might be an image of an amazing God. An amazing image of an amazing God. And this is clearly the more important point. Who do you belong to? This is the deeper question that needs to be answered, and one that Jesus is asking the scholars And the Spirit, through the gospel, is asking us. In order to answer the secondary question, is it lawful to pay taxes? The real question, are all our actions, whether they be paying taxes or taking out the trash, acts worthy of the likeness of God that we are? He doesn't directly answer the question, is it lawful or not? And I wonder maybe if he leaves it open, because a lot of our tests, we test people, a lot of our tests, those questions we ask ourselves and others, what are some of those tests? The loyalty, goodness, and righteousness tests that we hold ourselves and, more importantly, others accountable to. Who are you going to support, Trump or Biden? That's a test. We're testing you. Are you a supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement, or are you going to put this Blue Lives Matter bumper sticker on your car? Is your American flag hanging from your porch on Independence Day? Do you think illegal immigrants should be separated from their children? Do you think we should pay health care for someone else? On and on and on, we ask these questions, and I believe that we ask them sometimes as tests. Whose side is this person on? Are they on the right side, which happens to always be our side, or the wrong side? Ask this question instead of the questions that we often ask as tests. At the end of the day, when you lie yourself down to sleep, do you believe that day is going to earn the stamp of God's approval on it? Is God's seal going to be pressed into that day so upon that day, for all time, we can see something of God's reality in it, God's likeness through it? Are we confident, or at least cautiously optimistic, or at least terrifyingly humbly submit that God will say, "Good job, my faithful servant"? But that is what we are. We speak this reality of being God's image and God's seal in different ways. We are servants or slaves of God, those who do God's work in accordance with God's wishes. We are God's ambassadors, those who use God's words and God's mind in the place in which we live. We are siblings of Christ, those who bear a marked similarity in appearance or likeness to him who is the Son of God, the one who truly bears God's likeness on earth. At the end of the day, are we acting or are we being honest? At the end of the day, are we hypocritical or are we being authentic? The scholars sought to trap Jesus, and that is not what makes them hypocritical. What makes them hypocritical is that they had forgotten that they are an image of God and have started acting like they aren't. The attempted entrapment is a symptom of that ailment because it is dishonest, people. Because it is meant to belittle and to betray. Because it is done to make an enemy, not a friend. It is done to shame, not to honor. It is done to destroy, not transform. And those are not godly things. And no longer treating Jesus as an image of God, they are demonstrating how they have lost the awareness of how they are God's image themselves. This is a sign to us. It is sometimes difficult to self-diagnose our own problems. It's why we go to experts who tell us not to Google our symptoms. But when we start determining others are wrong, oh so wrong. I am guilty of thinking others as monsters sometime, are you? Look at them. I shake my head and wonder. Literally, sometimes I shake my head and wonder, look at them. I wonder at what they have done or sometimes not done, and I can't help but think, what kind of monster would do that? We use this term monster because in some way, some frightening and terribly wrong way, that person is no longer a good reflection, right? No longer a good image of what it means to be human. There's something else has happened. They're monsters. And honestly, if any among our kind deserve that name, Caesar would be there. As someone who seized power and refused to yield it and did anything to enforce it, he and all like him would be guilty of having that title. But Jesus, asking these scholars and looking at the image of this man, what do you see there? Do you see monster? Or do you see the potential and possible wonder and glory of God? And this might also be a source of their amazement as they walk away. Maybe he would be their enemy. Maybe he who would be their enemy has shown them that the greater enemy is never a person, but always the tendency to demonize others, who, whether they know it or not, act like it or not, are nonetheless always and forever shall be created in the image of God too. And that whenever we demonize others, maybe we need to stop and find a mirror and look at ourselves more clearly. Have we put on a mask? Has our face, ourselves, the truth of who we are, be as that created in God's image, been somehow hypocritically upstaged? We need to ask the question, how am I the sinner that I am? How am I the sinner that I am? Can you ask that question? Can you say those words honestly? How am I the sinner that I am? Also a beloved child of God. That is the right question to ask Jesus. And when we can come away with the answer, the only answer that I know that sufficiently qualifies as an answer, because Jesus Christ and his grace. When that is our answer, because Jesus Christ and his grace, then you can trust that you are seeing yourself more clearly, and because of it will have the ability to see others more clearly too, for what they are, for what we all are. We might be less tempted then to put others to the test in order to ensnare them with devilishly clever plots, meant to make us feel more justified in our despicable attitudes towards others. Instead, we might come to those we do not understand, we cannot even abide. Honestly, we might come to those who we might even need to resist, without so much malice and hatred, but with mercy and humility. We might come to them less with a desire to entrap them and say, aha, I knew you were stupid, and more with the hope of liberating them. Let me show you an awesome thing. We might come to them less with a desire to squash them from above and more a desire to lift them out of ignorance. We might come to them with less of an interest in seeing them damned to hell and more with one of seeing them as siblings as Christ. Listen to a word from God to you this morning.